Good morning. It's Friday the 25th of November and here's what's making news on 10 News First Breakfast. Nurses strike. Hundreds of healthcare professionals walk off the job today. Victoria decides the election race tightens as the polls prepare to close. Festive turbulence for Qantas. The airline throws travel plans into chaos ahead of Christmas. And the performances, awards and emotional tributes from the biggest night in Aussie music.
This is 10 News First with Natasha Exelby.
Good morning. The Home Affairs Minister is preparing to meet with Western Sydney mayors this morning to discuss the repatriation of ISIS-linked refugees to their community. Claire O'Neill will first hold talks at Fairfield City Council first before meeting community leaders. 4 women and 13 children were resettled into the community from Syrian detention camps about 3 weeks ago, while another 40 will be coming in the coming months. The minister's visit follows locals and coalition leaders raising concerns over the lack of consultation before the repatriation. Hundreds of nurses and midwives are preparing to walk off the job today in Western Australia, and the feud with the state government has taken a bizarre twist. The industrial umpire has threatened to hit the brakes on transport for the industrial action. 1,000 nurses have booked a bus seat to rally at Parliament House despite the order to pull off the strike.
I've written to the IRC just before and I've told them that I'm not going to obey their orders. I'm not having my nurses and midwives gagged.
800 surgeries have been cancelled as nurses demand a 5% wage increase. The government has now backflipped on its 3% pay rise promise, saying now it will dock the wages of any staff who walk off the job. It is now less than 34 hours until the polls close in the highly controversial Victorian election. Just a few weeks ago, Premier Daniel Andrews looked a shoo-in to maintain his job. But after a gruelling 4-week campaign, the political landscape is changing. Joining me at the desk to unpack all of this is state political reporter Patrick Murrell, who's been tracking the state of play with a fine-tooth comb. Good morning to you, Pat. Let's start with an easy question. Who's going to win?
Tash, the polls are pointing to a close race, as they were 4 years ago when they ended up being wrong, but they're the best information we've got to go on. Labor is ahead on all the polls, two-party preferred about 56 or 57%. That is a swing against them, though, and could mean they lose anything from 8 to about 12 seats. That will be mainly in the eastern and southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, but they could also lose seats in the inner city to the Greens. If they lose enough, they're currently on 55 in the lower house. If they lose more than 10, they will be reduced to a minority government and will have to deal with independents to form government.
Talk us through the key policy differences between Labor and the coalition.
Health, energy and cost of living have dominated the campaign, but both sides have taken a very different approach. Labor's promised about $11 billion worth of spending on road, rail and hospitals, and they've also promised to continue on with that suburban rail loop. They've also promised in terms of energy to bring back state-owned power in the form of the SEC. That's to solve the upcoming energy generation shortage. The Liberals, meanwhile, they promised about $28 billion of spending, again, mainly in the form of health, and to pay for that increased amount of spending, they're shelving that controversial suburban rail loop through Melbourne's eastern and southeastern suburbs. Both major parties have promised no new taxes and to bring the budget back into surplus by 2025. To do that, they're raiding the state's rainy day fund. The Liberals even going a step further and raiding the Victorian Future Fund to do that.
Now, you talk about the Labor Party currently holding 55 seats, and if they lose 11, then they lose government. In the federal election earlier this year, we saw a huge rise in independents and also the Teal Party. What's the likelihood of more independents coming into play in the state election, and how much is anyone who reaches government going to depend on them?
It's very likely we'll see an increased crossbench in the lower house, and that's because both parties have been suffering from a lower primary vote. Labor's almost guaranteed to lose at least 2 seats in the inner city to the Greens, potentially even 3 or 4, and the Teals have been running strong as well in the inner city. They're likely to pick up maybe 1 or 2 seats from the Liberals there, 1 from Labor, and even in Wodonga, regional Victoria, they could pick up a seat from the Liberals. So we'll see an increased representation of crossbenchers, and that means Labor, which is likely to have the bigger representation in the lower house, will have to deal with them to form government.
Patrick Murrell, it has been a very busy 4 weeks for you, almost as busy as both of the leaders. Keep the caffeine up and all of your fluids, and thanks so much for your thoughts.
Thanks, Nash.
Okay. In other news, it looks like Qantas could be in for a little festive turbulence, with the majority of its cabin crew voting in favour of industrial action. The move could leave the holiday plans of thousands of travellers up in the air, but not in the fun way. Almost all 1,200 domestic flight crew are threatening to walk off the job. They're protesting changes to their work conditions, including shorter work hours and better pay deals. No date or scope for the action has been set. The findings from an inquiry into Scott Morrison's secret ministries will be handed down today as his former treasurer breaks his silence. 10 News First political reporter Chloe Boris joins us now from Canberra. Good morning to you, Chloe. Josh Frydenberg, who was once a very good friend of Mr Morrison, has now spoken out.
Good morning. Yes, he has, loud and clear. Wrong, profoundly disappointing, and an extreme overreach.